Transport yourselves to the year 1327. Tabriz is the sparkling center of the Islamic world, steeped in luxury and treachery. In a vast palace adorned with azure tiles sits a ruler whose single gesture makes sultans tremble from Egypt to India. His name is Emir Choban. Technically, he does not wear a crown, nor does the golden blood of the Genghisids flow in his veins. Yet this man is the true master of the Ilkhanate, which stretches across the expanses of ancient Persia. The Khans on the throne have turned into obedient puppets, his sons have married princesses, and his daughter, Baghdad Khatun, dictates her will to monarchs. His army is ready to challenge heaven itself. But behind this grandeur lies a secret sewn into coarse sheep's wool. This colossal dominion and influence, shifting the borders of worlds, rests upon a single event from a century prior. The foundation of this dynasty was laid not by a grandiose battle, nor a cunning diplomatic alliance. The history of the Chobanids begins in the year 1177, in a pile of dirty, matted, sweat-soaked sheep's wool. There, at the bottom of a creaking cart, gasping from the heat, a teenager was hiding. Outside, the shouts of pursuers rang out as they pierced haystacks with sharp pikes. The steel tip passed a mere inch from the fugitive's ribs. The life of the future shaker of the universe depended in that second not on celestial fate, but on the composure of a simple youth. His name was Chilaun. Today we open the final chapter of the Four Heroes cycle. We have already seen how the aristocrat Borchu became the conscience of the empire. We watched as the former slave Mukhali transformed into its sword. In the last episode, we honored Borohul, the living shield of the dynasty. But the fourth remains, the one whose destiny stands apart. Chilaun did not redraw maps like the great strategist Subutai, nor did he possess the terrifying fury of Jebe. His figure is a hymn to the loyalty of the little man. The son of the farmhand Sorgan Shira, coming from a lineage without rights or titles, he could not even dream of a place in the chronicles. And yet it was he who performed a deed that Genghis Khan valued higher than the conquest of a dozen cities. In this episode, we will dissect the anatomy of a debt of honor. You will learn how mercy in a destitute yurt turned into political capital, on the interest of which the hero's descendants lived for centuries. We will analyze the psychology of the moment when the victim gains the right to become the executioner. For it is Chilaun to whom Genghis Khan entrusts the right to put a period at the end of the life of his arch-enemy from childhood, the fat Khan, Targhutai. A drama of social revolution will unfold before you. You will see how the Suldus clan, considered black bone, soared to the top of the hierarchy, gaining privileges inaccessible to princes. Enter my tent without announcement. Ask for whatever you wish. Such was the carte blanche issued to the savior. And finally, we will trace how this gift turned into a curse. The path of Chilaun and his heirs is a tragedy about what happens when the servant becomes stronger than the master. We will see the collapse of the Chobanids, who, drunk on power in Persia, forgot the main covenant. The shadow must not be larger than the one who casts it. This is not just a chronicle of war. It is a story of how one noble gesture changes the genetic code of history. Welcome to an era where the life of an emperor was worth less than a bale of wool, and loyalty was paid for kingdoms. Chronicles of the Greats, Episode 4, Chilaun, the savior who became the shadow of the throne. The year 1177. Eastern Mongolia. The magnitude of Chilaun's feat cannot be appreciated without feeling the atmosphere of total terror that shackled his family. The family of Sorgan-Shira hailed from the Suldus tribe. The steppe hierarchy branded them as black bone, effectively serfs attached to the Tayichiud clan. Their lot was to herd someone else's flock and remain silent while the masters spoke. That night, the established order collapsed. Young Temujin, locked in a heavy wooden collar, a kang, decided on a daring escape. The prisoners stunned a guard and dove into the icy waters of the Onan River. A hunting party combed the bank. It was Sorgan-Shira who first spotted the fugitive, hidden by the river so that only his nostrils were visible above the surface. The psychology of a farmhand demanded that he turn the fugitive in. Such an act promised a reward and peace. However, Sorgan-Shira remained silent. He merely whispered, "Lie still," and led the riders away. Instead of vanishing into the steppe, Temujin, blinded by desperation, committed an act of madness. He showed up directly at the yurt of his savior. The father fell into a panic. "I told you to leave. You will doom us all," the old man shouted, realizing for harboring an enemy the Tayichiuds would exterminate his entire lineage. It is at this moment that Chilaun steps onto the stage. Chilaun, together with his brother Chimbai, shielded the fugitive from their trembling father. The secret history of the Mongols has preserved their answer for us. It is not merely words of comfort, but the philosophical manifesto of a simple shepherd. When a bird flees from a kite into the thicket, the bush protects it. Are we then worse than a bush? The youth takes command. He decides on an act of disobedience unthinkable for that era. The son gives an order to the father. Chilaun knocks the heavy kang off Temujin, throws the wood into the hearth, and hides the guest securely. The place he chose for a hideout was legendary. Not a cellar, not a chest, but a cart loaded with sheep's wool standing in the scorching sun. The Tayichiud camp is buzzing like a disturbed hive. Hundreds of nukers search every yurt. A search party bursts into Sorgan-Shira's domain. Warriors gut the bedding, look under the felt. Before them is a bale stuffed with fleece. Inside, in a stifling, dusty cocoon, curled up like an embryo, the future shaker of the universe has frozen still. The temperature within the matted mass is skyrocketing. Dust tears at the throat, but coughing is forbidden. One of the pursuers, too lazy to unpack the load, randomly stabs the pile with a spear. The steel tip passes millimeters from flesh, barely touching the clothes. In those seconds, the life of Genghis Khan and the fate of half the world hung by a thread, entrusted to Chilaun's composure. The young man did not flinch and did not avert his gaze. On the contrary, with a smile, he tossed a phrase to the pursuers, disarming in its simplicity. In such heat, even meat would rot in sheep's fur. How could a human endure it there? The killers believed him. The chase moved on. As soon as the danger passed, the family of farmhands did the impossible. They armed the former prisoner. Chilaun provided Temujin with everything necessary for survival in the steppe: a horse with a white mark on the muzzle, a supply of meat, and a bow with arrows. However, the youth did not give a saddle or a flint striker. There was a cunning logic in this detail. If the fugitive were caught, the absence of these items would divert suspicion from the givers. Temujin vanished into the night. For Chilaun, life returned to its usual rut: endless flocks, Tayichiud masters, and rightlessness. The shepherd did not suspect that this night had turned into an investment with the highest yield in human history. Decades later, at the Great Kurultai, Genghis Khan would address his saviors not as sovereign to servants, but as a debtor to creditors. His words would thunder across the entire steppe. "You saved my life when it was worth nothing. Now take everything you desire. Enter my tent without announcement. If you commit 9 mortal sins, I will forgive you everything." There, amidst the dirty fleece, a slave died, and a Darkhan, a man standing above the law, was born. However, before resting on his laurels, Chilaun has to prove that he knows how to not only show mercy, but also strike down enemies. His first target will be the one before whom he trembled his entire childhood. The moment of truth will arrive in 20 years, when Temujin returns to settle all scores. The year 1201. The steppe has transformed. Now the boots of armies thunder here, rather than water splashing under a hiding teenager. Temujin has returned. The outcast has exchanged the lot of a fugitive for the title of Khan, rallying all the rejected around him. However, the status of Genghis Khan requires more than just a powerful horde. The leader must uproot his deepest fear. He must execute the past itself. The name of this past is Targhutai Kiriltuch. Let us look closely at the details. Who is this man? In Temujin's nightmares, he appeared as the formidable chief of the Tayichiuds, the all-powerful master of chains. But time is a ruthless sculptor. By 1201, Targhutai has turned into a caricature of himself. The chronicles of Rashid al-Din describe him with surgical precision. He has grown monstrously fat. Kiriltuch is not just a nickname, it is a medical verdict. A mountain of flesh, unable to stay in the saddle. Imagine this grotesque finale. The chief who dreamed of power over the steppe is being hauled in a cart because the spine of no horse can support such weight. He has spread out on cushions and powerlessly commands a retreat. The Tayichiuds are broken. Those very same arrogant lords who left Temujin's family to starve to death are now abandoning their yurts and livestock in panic. In the vanguard of the pursuit flies Chilaun. Reality has turned inside out. The son of the farmhand Sorgan Shira, who once trembled before his masters, now leads the army of retribution. The status of Black Bone is forgotten. Now he is a Nukar, the striking instrument of heaven's will. A profound psychological drama plays out here. To kill an enemy in battle is valor, but to raise a hand against a former suzerain to whom your ancestors bowed for centuries, this is a taboo. Steppe law brands such an act as a crime against the world order. A slave has no right to the blood of a master. Yet, Temujin entrusts the execution specifically to Chilaun. Why? This is not just a reprisal, but a severe exam. It is vital for the Khan to know, has Chilaun managed to expunge the baggage hand instinct from within himself? Will he step over the sacred terror before a natural Khan for the sake of loyalty to the new leader? The chase ends in the Hutukul tract. Chilaun overtakes the convoy. Before him is not an epic battle, but a pitiful spectacle. The guards have fled, and in the cart, gasping from the shaking, wheezes Targhutai. The one who instilled terror in the Borjigin clan is now helpless, like an overturned turtle. According to the Compendium of Chronicles, the denouement comes instantly. Chilaun wastes no words on dialogue and leaves no chance for captivity. A spear strike pierces the flabby body of the former master. Appreciate the irony of the moment. A quarter of a century ago, Chilaun hid Temujin in a cart of wool, tearing him from Targhutai's clutches. Now he finds Targhutai in a cart and cuts his life short. The wagon, which served as a symbol of salvation, has turned into a scaffold. Chilaun returns not merely with news of triumph. He carries proof of the death of the old world. By executing Targhutai, he buried the very idea of the inviolability of noble clans. Life is now defined not by purity of blood, but by strength and loyalty. Temujin accepts him as a brother in arms. From this moment, Sorgan Shira's family ceases to be a base class. They have made a social leap unthinkable for that era. Former shepherds become the pillars of a new empire. Later, old Sorgan Shira arrives at the camp. The secret history has preserved their conversation. To the Khan's question of the reasons for the delay, the old man answers with utmost honesty. Had we arrived earlier, the Noyons would have scattered us like ash. We were biding our time. The Khan approves of this pragmatism. He needs not blind fanaticism, but calculated devotion. The family is showered with gifts, but the main thing is they are granted status. Chilaun and his brother Chimbai receive the right to all war booty, but the highest honor lies elsewhere. They can carry a quiver in the Khan's presence and drink wine at Kurultais on equal footing with the highest figures. The transformation is complete. The youth who hid a fugitive in wool has become the executor of tyrants. Chilaun has withstood the bloody trial. Ahead lies the Great War, where standing against the Mongols will not be cowards in carts, but the iron phalanxes of the Naiman Khanate. In 1204, he will enter the chronicles as one of the 4 heroes whose names will make enemies shudder from China to Rus. However, triumph has a shadow. Temujin will have to turn his heroes into gears of a massive machine of order. Mongolia has frozen before a leap into eternity, and Chilaun stands in the front row. The year 1204. The steppes are frozen in anticipation of the climax. The confrontation with the Naiman Khanate goes far beyond the scope of a typical raid for livestock. 2 civilizations are colliding here. On one side is Tayang Khan, a stronghold of the old world with hereditary power and a cult of titles. On the other is Temujin, whose meritocracy allows yesterday's slave to command princes. To crush such a giant as the Naimans, fury alone is not enough. The leader requires a system. A concept enters the historical stage that became the foundation of the Mongol war machine. The commander divides his best associates into 2 castes with polar functions. The group of 4 dogs, Jebe, Hubilai, Jelme, and Subutai, are turned into instruments of aggression, the vanguard for pursuit. Counterbalancing them are the 4 Kuluks, the 4 Steeds, or 4 heroes. This number includes Borochu, Mukali, Borohul, and our hero, Chilaun. Chilaun's position in this quartet is unique. If Mukali personifies the brain of the army and Borochu its spirit, then Chilaun embodies physical might and frontal armor. In the coming battle, He will act not as a strategist in a quiet tent, but as a living battering ram, obliged to smash through the formation of an enemy superior in numbers. May 1204, the foothills of the Altai. The Naiman army occupies the commanding height on Mount Nahu Gun. The enemy chooses a passive tactic, waiting for the moment when the Mongols shatter against their formation like waves against a rock. Tayang Khan is confident in triumph. His forces are vast, well-fed, and magnificently armed. Temujin gives an order that has become a classic of warfare. The horsemen form up in a chisel, a narrow, deep wedge to break the center. At the very tip of the attack, at the hottest point of impact, stands Chilaun. That day, Chilaun operated with frightening efficiency. A normal attack was not enough for him. The commander demonstrated the total superiority of the new military school over the obsolete one. Disciplined units ignored trophies. Step by step, the warriors methodically drove the Naimans to the top of the mountain. Psychological pressure wounded more terribly than arrows. Trapped on a narrow patch of ground, the Naimans succumbed to panic. Under the cover of night, in an attempt to flee, warriors crushed each other and fell into the abyss. Chilaun, watching this from the foot of the mountain, recorded the demise of the old aristocracy. Absolute victory ensued. After the enemy's defeat, no obstacles remained to sole rule. The year 1206 arrives. The great Kurultai on the Onan River. Temujin is proclaimed Genghis Khan. However, holding a gigantic territory requires a structure capable of uniting disparate tribes. The sovereign reforms the Keshik, his personal guard. From a modest detachment of bodyguards, it swells to 10,000 select fighters. The guard transforms into the government, the Ministry of Personnel, and the highest military academy. Chilaun receives an appointment elevating him above any field commander. Now he is one of the 4 leaders of the Day Guard, the Turhauds. Behind these pompous titles lay the harsh reality of power. The family of Sorgan Shira, who once toiled for the Tayichiuds, now controls access to the emperor's body. In a world where any issue requires a personal petition to the ruler, Chilaun transforms into the Gate of Power. The sovereign endows him and his brother Chimbai with a privilege that sounds like music to a former slave. The secret history has preserved the Khan's words. If a thought or need arises, do not seek intermediaries. Tell me everything personally with your own lips. This carte blanche grants the right to enter the sovereign's yurt without announcement and search at any time. Genghis Khan's own brothers, Hasar and Belgutai, still requested permission from the guard. Chilaun is the exception. This is what the highest form of trust possible between suzerain and vassal looks like. Chilaun's elevation marks a tectonic shift in Mongol society. The Sorgan Shira clan, considered base or common, soars to the peak of the hierarchy. Genghis Khan does not limit himself to rewards. He cements the status of his comrade's family at legislative level. The warrior accepts the title of Darkhan. From now on, he has the right to keep all booty from hunting or war for himself without paying a tithe to the treasury. But the status grants something more important: exemption from responsibility for any 9 offenses. Genghis Khan places his loyal friend above the law he self-created. The Yasa remains severe to all, except those who protected the body of the Khan in the years of his powerlessness. The ex-farmhand's son gains immunity which his descendants will inherit for centuries. Chilaun turns from a rank-and-file fighter into a symbol. His life proves, in Genghis Khan's empire, loyalty is converted into greatness at the most favorable exchange rate. The era of the four kuluks does not last forever. War takes the best. Chilaun will depart from life unexpectedly early, passing his privileges to his children. It is up to the hero's heirs to turn this capital of trust into real political power in lands whose existence old Sorgan Shira did not even suspect. Ahead looms the campaign to the west, the lands of the Persians, the walls of Baghdad, and the birth of a dynasty that will one day challenge the Genghisids themselves. Chilaun's death did not cut the history of his lineage short. Rather, it transformed into a prologue for a new, even more massive chapter. In the middle of the 13th century, Genghis Khan's grandson, Hulagu, launches the famous Yellow Crusade into the Middle East. The sovereign required not just warriors, but proven comrades, those whose fathers once saved his grandfather. He calls the sons of Chilaun, Alakan and Sarta, to his banners. Imagine this tectonic shift. People whose horizon was limited for centuries by the steppe expanse and the banks of the Onon are rapidly leaving their native encampments. The Suldus clan, just yesterday bearing the brand of black bone, now leads punitive Tumans. Former farmhands switch into golden saddles, crushing ancient civilizations. Through the smoking ruins of Baghdad in 1258 pass the Suldus warriors. The nomads' horses drink greedily from the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates. Before the eyes of yesterday's steppe dwellers, the caliphate, which stood unshakable for 5 centuries, collapses. Amidst the chaos of war, Chilaun's descendants find a new home. The place of harsh Mongolia with its icy breath is taken by bountiful Iran, a land of vineyards, gardens, and untold treasures. Hulagu, proclaimed the first Ilkhan, generously rewards his vassals for loyalty. The Suldus clan receives the richest lands of Azerbaijan and Anatolia to govern. Former shepherds turn into powerful feudal lords. Now they rule over cities whose age exceeds the history of the entire Mongol ethnos. From the severe Mongol steppes, we transport ourselves to the silken curtains of Tabriz. Half a century passes. We are on the threshold of the 14th century, in the capital of the Ilkhanate. Here, the great-great-grandson of our hero takes the stage, Amir Choban. Before us is not a rank-and-file nuker ready to lay down his life for a master, but a true political titan. Choban formally reports to 3 Ilkhans in a row, Ghazan, Oljetu, and Abu Sa'id. However, the verb serves is hardly appropriate. In fact, he directs their will himself. Let us uncover the underpinnings of his might. Amir Choban achieves a status that in medieval Europe would be considered unthinkable for a person not of golden blood. The emperor of the Yuan dynasty, Yesun Temur, the supreme ruler of the Mongols, grants him a seal and the title Commander-in-Chief, equal in honor. The incredible happens. The great Khan equates a servant of the Ilkhanate to the highest princes of the empire. Choban's power becomes absolute. He marries his son to the daughter of Ilkhan Oljetu, mixing the blood of the Suldus with the golden bone of the Genghisids. Such a union tramples ancient laws of the steppe, yet no one dares to argue. Choban's offspring occupy governors' chairs in key provinces, and his daughter, Baghdad Khatun, a recognized beauty of the era, decides the fates of states with a single glance. Therein lies a striping irony. Chilaun saved Temujin in piles of dirty wool, risking his life every second. Years later, his descendant sits on a throne of ivory, and the Genghisids themselves seek his mercy. The credit of loyalty opened by Chilaun in 1177 yielded fantastic dividends. However, such a legacy harbors danger. It inevitably awakens the envy of monarchs. By 1317, the throne is occupied by the young Abu Sa'id. While formally leading Iran, he actually remains only a shadow of the powerful regent. Amir Choban disposes of the treasury, controls the army, and keeps the state seal. He personally conducts dialogue with Egypt and the Golden Horde, never doubting his own inviolability. After all, his ancestor earned the right of 9 pardons from the Shaker of the universe himself. However, Choban ignores the bitter lesson of history. Chilaun rose, intentionally remaining in the Khan's shadow, turning into his shield. Choban, however, has outgrown his sovereign. He has eclipsed the sun itself. In the 1320s, the confrontation between the lazy monarch and his omnipotent vizier reaches its apogee. The young Khan matures and no longer wishes to remain a puppet. The fatal spark, as in a classic tragedy, turns out to be a woman. Abu Sa'id falls passionately in love with Choban's married daughter, Baghdad Khatun. Citing the great Yasa, which gives the ruler the right to any woman of the Ulus, he demands her for himself. Choban responds with a daring refusal. Such a gesture goes beyond a family scandal, turning into an act of high treason. The servant finally places himself above the master. In this moment, the spirit of the loyal Chilaun must have shuddered. His descendant is destroying the very basis of the clan's existence, absolute, unwavering loyalty to the Genghisids. A trap has snapped shut. The Suldus clan, ascended thanks to devotion, is doomed to perish because of pride. The fall will prove as rapid as the rise. Ahead lies the year 1327, a time of blood, betrayal, and the sunset of a dynasty that dared to compare itself to its gods. The year 1327. Abu Sa'id delivers a crushing blow. With his decree, he turns Amir Choban and his entire family into enemies of the state. Yesterday's supporters, who sought the mercy of the powerful ruler, instantly renounce him. Choban's army, a colossus considered indestructible, crumbles to dust without a single battle. The warriors understand. Devotion to a commander is important, but loyalty to a Genghisid is sacred. The disgraced emir seeks salvation in Herat with old allies from the Kart dynasty. He relies on the sacred law of hospitality. However, fear of the Khan's wrath outweighs ancient traditions. The ruler of Herat cold-bloodedly betrays his guest. The scene of Choban's death puts a bloody period in the chronicle of the Suldus clan. He is seized and strangled with a bowstring. This is a noble execution, allowing no blood to be spilled on the earth. But death is followed by dishonor. The severed finger of the great regent is sent to Abu Sa'id as proof of loyalty. A century and a half later, the circle has closed. Once, Chilaun tore Genghis Khan from the jaws of death. Now, the heir of the great Khan cold-bloodedly destroys the descendant of his savior, fearing his excessive power. Following the father, the daughter also perishes. Baghdad Khatun, who became the Khan's wife after the massacre of her family, soon receives an accusation of conspiracy. She is executed right in her own bath. The dynasty that effectively held the reins of rule over Iran finds itself decapitated. But history prepared one last, most bitter irony. By dealing with the faithful dogs guarding the throne, Abu Sa'id effectively signed the death warrant for his own state. The Chobanids served as that steel frame upon which the Khanate held together. As soon as the support collapsed, the building of the empire was covered in fatal cracks. In 1335, 8 years after Choban's execution, Abu Sa'id dies without leaving an heir. The great state crumbles into a patchwork quilt of warring fiefdoms.
The circle has closed. A history that began with an act of mercy in a stifling cart of sheep's wool poured out a century and a half later into a bloody massacre in the palaces of Tabriz. The Suldus clan, elevated for saving Temujin, fell when it dared to surpass his descendants. Chilaun's loyalty laid the foundation of the empire, but Choban's pride turned these walls into ruins. We have traveled this path together. Great destinies have flashed before our eyes. Borchu, who became the conscience of the realm. Mukali, the former slave who turned into the punishing sword in China. We mourned Borokhul, the living shield of the Khan's headquarters, who perished in the deep taiga. And today we have seen off Chilaun, the shadow that embraced the entire Middle East with its wings. These four acted as the chief architects. They erected the state system, forged laws, and hardened the army. But any construction requires a void. To clear space for the Mongol dominion, the old world had to be erased into dust. In textbooks, Genghis Khan's opponents often appear as faceless extras, bowling pins flying apart from the impact of the Mongol ball. This is a dangerous misconception. The shaker of the universe was opposed by titans. Each of them had their own drama and their own undeniable truth. Many surpassed Temujin in talents, wealth, or nobility, but it was they who tasted the flavor of defeat. What stood behind this? The will of heaven or a fatal error in the code of their civilizations? Concluding the chronicle of the Great Fours, we prepare to open a new page. In the next cycle, the camera will swivel 180 degrees. We will look at the great conquest through the eyes of those who met the flying arrow with their chests. But whose tragedy will become our next topic? Now it is your turn to determine the course of history. 3 paths lie before you, 3 great shipwrecks. The first leads to the steppe, the most personal and bitter chronicle, the drama of civil war. There waits Jamukha, the blood brother who became a sworn enemy. There Wang Khan betrays his adopted son out of fear, and the arrogance of Taiyang Khan destroys the ancient Naiman people. If you are drawn to the story of the collapse of the old aristocracy under the blows of the people of long will, choose steppe in the comments. The second path is Jin, a confrontation that seemed impossible. 50 million subjects of the Golden Empire against 1 million nomads. Stone dragons and gunpowder shells against swift cavalry. You will learn about General Chen He-shang, the only one who forced Subutai to retreat, and the last emperor who accepted death together with his people. If the clash of civilizations and the fall of the world's greatest wall is closer to you, write Jin. The third path is Khwarezm, an anatomy of a catastrophe. The story of how the greed of one governor in Otrar overflowed God's cup of patience. You will see Sultan Muhammad, who possessed the largest army in the world, yet died in poverty on an island. And before you will stand Jalal al-Din, a lone hero whose courage was admired by Genghis Khan himself. If you want to understand how fear burns out states faster than sabers, cast your vote for Khwarezm. Steppe, Jin, Khwarezm. The map of the future cycle is in your hands. Where the 2 men of our stories heads next time is for you to decide. This has been Chronicles of the Greats. We do not just retell facts, we shed light on the shadows of the past to understand the present.